Light 'em up.
My name is Live with David, executive producer of the hottest sports debate show on Colorcast, on the internet, dare I say. And welcome to episode 28. This is season 3, episode 3. And leading us off tonight are Calvin and Matt. Matt is making his Light 'em Up debut.
Thank you.
And they'll be, welcome. And we're going to start this debate off debating who will be the top 5 fantasy quarterbacks in 2022. So this is definitely, if you're doing your pre-drafts and trying to figure out who you want to, start or whatever, definitely want to tune into this one. These two are some fantasy fiends. So happy to have them on to get us started tonight. So with that being said, Calvin, you have the better record. You'll be able to kick things off with your 2-minute. You'll be able to choose how you want to kick off. Do you choose to start or do you choose to defer?
I will start and then end later.
Yes, sir. All right. Well, with that being said, my friend, your 2-minute opening statement starts when you begin.
All right. Here are my top 5 fantasy quarterbacks for 2022. And in my eyes, there's really only one way to rank these top guys. At the top, of course, is last season's quarterback 1 overall, Josh Allen. Allen's easily the most productive quarterback for fantasy with a cannon of an arm, rushing ability, and the willingness to run the ball in himself at the goal line. All traits that lend themselves perfectly to peak fantasy production. Justin Herbert comes in at number 2, having retained every single one of his weapons this offseason while getting tight end Gerald Everett and a first-round guard added to his already upgraded O-line. Herbert racks up big plays with a sneaky rushing baseline, and he's only going to get better in the 3rd season of his career. At 3, it's Kyler Murray, a player who started off last season at a historic pace before injury and the loss of DeAndre Hopkins. Hopkins is going to miss 6 games to start this year. That's sure going to hurt Murray's stock in the beginning, but the Cardinals were able to bring in Hollywood Brown from the Ravens, who should fit in much better with Arizona than he did in Baltimore, who often struggled to use his deep gut ability properly. Murray's start of season stock may take a slight hit, but he will have top-level dual threat upside for your fantasy playoffs after a dampened first 6 weeks. Lamar Jackson slots in at 4, another dual threat quarterback who, like Allen and Murray, breaks fantasy football with his rushing ability. Despite dealing with injuries and barely playing in one of his quote-unquote starts, Jackson still finished 7th in fantasy points per game, and he was 2nd in fantasy points per game through an incredible first 9 weeks before the injuries. Patrick Mahomes rounds out the list at number 5 for his consistent production over the last couple years. Mahomes doesn't have the elite upside of the other guys on this list, but he can still produce plenty of fantasy points with his passing ability, although he takes a slight hit after losing the now highest paid receiver in the league in Tyreek Hill. Long story short, rushing ability is king in normal scoring fantasy leagues. Quarterbacks only put up 1 point per 25 passing yards and 4 points per passing touchdown, but they rack up 1 point per just 10 rushing yards and 6 points per rushing touchdown. This makes the choice obvious. You're targeting rushing quarterbacks in your drafts, period, end of sentence. That's why these guys are the top 5 in fantasy next year.
All right. Thank you, Calvin, for that opening statement. And okay, great. You're already gone on mute. Appreciate that, buddy. Matt, you can come off of mute and you can make your first ever opening statement on Light 'em Up. Your 2 minutes starts now.
Thank you. So, for my top 5 fantasy quarterbacks, I'm going all AFC here. That's right. The AFC is the most prolific conference of the 2 conferences in the NFL, and you're going to get prolific fantasy points from each of these 5 quarterbacks that I'm going to say right now. And keep in mind, I have 3 on the outside looking in from the NFC, but Kyler Murray is not one of them. I'm going to debate that why. But here's my top 5. At number 5, I like to go from 5 up to 1. At number 5, I got Derek Carr. Why? Because he's got Devontae Adams, a guy that he used to play with at Fresno State. He's got Darren Waller, a really solid tight end from 2020 that I think can rebound in 2022. And he's got Hunter Renfrow on the slot, and Josh Jacobs is a good running back that can do a little bit of everything in the passing game and in the running game. So that's why I have the Raiders at 5. At number 4, I have Joe Burrow. T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, Jamar Chase. Tight end's a little bit shaky for me when it comes to Joe Burrow because all he has is Drew Sample. Losing C.J. Uzomah is going to hurt his cause. But at the same time, you can't argue he's got one of the best arms in all of football. And I think that having 3 stud receivers is going to help your fantasy value. The only problem with Joe Burrow, as well as not having a good tight end, is lack of mobility. Same with Derek Carr. But I think those 2 are really good nonetheless because of the college connection. At number 3, I have Justin Herbert. Why Justin Herbert? Because Mike Williams and Keenan Allen, 2 really good receivers. And then I like Jalen Guyton as a contemporary 3rd guy. Mobility, again, is going to hurt Justin Herbert's value because he's a true passer. So you're not going to get any ground points when it comes to Justin Herbert. But you are going to get solid passing production. And that's really what matters the most when it comes to quarterbacks in fantasy. Number 2, I have Patrick Mahomes. Because Patrick Mahomes is a dual threat. He can run, he can throw. He's got Travis Kelce. He's got Sky Moore. He's got Marquez Valdes-Scantling. He's got Juju Smith-Schuster when he's not on TikTok. He's got McCole Hardman, who I think could be a speedster and a really good fantasy value receiver as well. That could be potentially the number one receiver to use. And at number one, I got Josh Allen. I mean, he's just receivers and tight ends galore. You can't deny it. Josh Allen is number one. He's got the Bills offense that is loaded, one of the best offenses in the NFL, and probably going to be an MVP candidate in 2022. So to recap my list, Allen, Mahomes, Herbert, Burrow, and Carr.
All right. And right on time. Thank you for that opener, Matt. Calvin, you can come off of mute. And gentlemen, your 10 minutes of crossfire starts now. Light them up.
All right, so I guess here's what I don't get about your rankings. Like, you have Mahomes at number 2 here. He was 5 in points per game from weeks 1 through 17, number 5, and now he loses Tyreek Hill, who was like, now he's the highest paid receiver in the league. So there's no doubt that takes a hit, but like, how is he going up now from last year after losing that guy?
Well, the reason why Patrick Mahomes is going up is because, yeah, you don't have the yak value of Tyreek Hill, which hurts fantasy owners who have Patrick Mahomes. But at the same time, the guy is a dual threat quarterback. One of the reasons why I don't really agree with your list is because Patrick Mahomes can work with whatever he's got. He can run, he can throw. He has the push pass with McCole Hardman. Don't forget, push passes in fantasy football count as passing yards for Patrick Mahomes. People forget that. It doesn't count as rushing points. It doesn't count as end-around running points for receivers. So why I like Patrick Mahomes so much is because he can work with whatever he's got. And also on top of that, he's a dynamic passer. He's got a great arm. He can sling it whenever he wants to. He does shovel passes underneath. He does little things that make a big difference. And I think having a phenomenal receiving core is going to help him long term in fantasy years.
He's absolutely a dual threat, but like, we're talking about, I mean, 3 of the guys here that I have at the top, like Josh Allen at 1, Murray at 3, Jackson at 4, they all run the ball far more than Mahomes. The only one who's even comparable is Herbert, who literally had like only 3 less carries last year than Patrick Mahomes. Like, it was 63 versus 66. But Herbert tossed over 5,000 yards. Now he's got all his guys back. He's added Gerald Everett, and they upgraded an already good offensive line in the draft. So Herbert's only upgrading. That's why he's so high. But everyone else on here, they have that game-breaking rushing ability. Mahomes had under 400 rushing yards. So how is he going to have that ceiling that the other guys have? How is he going to have the, like, guys you have ahead of him? You have behind him. You have Kyler Murray behind him, way behind him, out of your top 5. Same with Jackson. How is there such big of a difference between those guys and Patrick Mahomes?
Well, the big difference for me is because Lamar Jackson, as good as he is, and he was a former MVP of the league, I think the league has figured him out. I mean, if you go to weeks 10 through 13 of last season, Lamar Jackson only averaged 16 fantasy points per game. If you want a good fantasy performance from a quarterback, you need 20 plus. Weeks 10 through 13, where you're playing the Browns, you're playing possibly division opponents, that's not really going to cut it. And plus, Lamar Jackson, while he can scramble, he's not that great of a passer. So Lamar Jackson is asked to run the football, and he's really good at that. And he's so fast that he can get you some fantasy points on the ground, which is worth more than passing yards points. But at the same time, consistency is another big problem that I have with Lamar Jackson. He'll be good the beginning of the season. He'll light it up. And then in the middle of the season, he'll kind of slow down. And then the end of the year we saw last year, he didn't even start because of injury. And then with Kyler Murray, same thing. Starts off red hot, puts up 30, 40 points. And then in the middle of the year, he gets injured, comes back. The Cardinals struggle down the stretch. And so does Kyler Murray. If you want consistency out of fantasy quarterbacks, I don't think Kyler Murray and Lamar Jackson, while they are dynamic and while they're great dual threat quarterbacks, I just don't trust them, especially with the team they're on. I mean, look at Lamar Jackson, for instance. Lamar Jackson has one good passing target, and that's Mark Andrews. Rashad Bateman has to step up, and they needed someone to break out from that receiving core. And I just don't see that coming from the Ravens. And then you said before with Kyler Murray, no DeAndre Hopkins the first 6 weeks, and he has to redevelop a rapport with Marquise Brown.
Yeah, sure. Of course he does. And I mean, that's going to take a hit for him, but Murray still has that rushing baseline that's going to be so huge. And when it matters in the fantasy playoffs and later in the season, I mean, he's going to be great for you. The fact is, with these early round quarterbacks, I mean, I wouldn't normally even advise drafting any of them because there's just so many guys available on the waiver wire. You can easily stream a guy through the first 6 weeks. I mean, you don't even have to stream him every week. Just use Murray as a matchup play. He will be good for you some weeks. And then when it really matters in crunch time in the second half of the season, he will go off. And Lamar Jackson, like you said, he was inconsistent. I mean, he really even wasn't much of last year. On his starts, only had 2 games less than 16 fantasy points. I'm not counting the week 14 game against Cleveland because he only had 4 attempts and got hurt. And then when you said that week 10 through 13 stretch, week 11 he missed because he had COVID. Then week 10 and week 13 he had 16.4 and 18.6 fantasy points. And in week 12 he had 13.4. Sure, that's not incredible, but every quarterback has off games. Those aren't even that bad. Those are still like back end quarterback 1 numbers for the most part, other than that week 12 game. Then he missed the rest of the season with injuries. Like you said, not because he was inconsistent, just because he got unlucky and got hurt. Bateman already showed a lot of flashes last year. He's going to be able to step into this role, and I mean, that's just a great target for Lamar in short and medium passing, but Mark Andrews in the rushing game was more than enough for him already, and he showed it just a couple of years ago with a game-breaking, by far QB1 ceiling. He's got that ceiling. That's what you're drafting him for. He can majorly disappoint from the ceiling he's shown he can have and still be a top 5 quarterback when I have him at number 4. That's a very, very realistic spot for him given his upside.
Well, 5 minutes to go, gentlemen. 5 minutes.
5 minutes? Okay, so let me just tell you, well, you mentioned a lot of points about Kyler Murray, and you mentioned a lot of points about Lamar Jackson. Let me tell you why I put Derek Carr so high. I know his ceiling is not that high, but he's got the best receiver in the NFL in Davante Adams, and that's a game breaker. I mean, Aaron Rodgers wasn't the best fantasy quarterback last year, but he put up prolific numbers most of the time because he had Davante Adams, a guy who could, stretch the field, a guy who can catch passes every now and then, an all-reliable target. Kyler Murray is not that great of a passer, and I get the rushing upside, and I get it, same with Lamar Jackson. But if you want pure passing numbers that are going to put up fantasy galore, Derek Carr is the guy for you. And same thing with, I'm trying to think who else I had. I had Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow is not the most mobile guy, but when you got 3 receivers that are just massive game changers, I absolutely can say that Joe Burrow has 3 top-tier receivers that can stretch the field, can score at will, and this Bengals offense, even with Joe Mixon, I forgot to mention Joe Mixon for the Bengals, he's great at everything he does. So when you have running backs that can do everything, because running backs are expected to do everything now, it's not just solely on the quarterback anymore. So if you have tailor-made weapons for you, this is what's going to help break Joe Burrow and Derek Carr's numbers open dramatically. I think that everything that you just said about Kyler and Lamar, yeah, it's a nice first few weeks of the season, but if you want to go deep in the fantasy playoffs, I don't trust Kyler Murray and I don't trust Lamar Jackson.
You absolutely should be trusting them. And the fact is, Derek Carr just does not compare. Yes, he's going to get a major upgrade with Davante Adams. Let's do even probably generous comparison. I want to compare Aaron Rodgers, the guy who had Davante Adams last year. I want to compare Aaron Rodgers to Kyler Murray and Lamar Jackson. Aaron Rodgers averaged 21.47 fantasy points in 2021. He's an incredible quarterback, back-to-back MVPs, far better than Derek Carr. We can all agree. That was still more than a full point per game less than Kyler Murray, who was even dealing with injuries, who had 22.57 fantasy points. Lamar, if you take out his bad game, also exceeded Aaron Rodgers. And this isn't even Derek Carr. This is Aaron Rodgers. Derek Carr was all the way down at 15.98 fantasy points per game. That's 7 less than what Kyler had. That's about 5 less than what Lamar had if you don't even take out that injured game. About 6 if you do. So he's just not on the level. Not because he's not a good QB, but the fact is he doesn't have that rushing upside. 5 or 6 points a game, 7 points a game difference, that is massive. I don't want to take Derek Carr at the quarterback 5 in the 5th or 6th round because he just doesn't have the upside to be anything better than that. And as for Joe Burrow, you talked about Joe Mixon. He's the whole problem with Joe Burrow's situation anyway because this offense was so middle of the pack in pass attempts. They were around 16th, 17th in pass attempts last year, and that's why, Joe Burrow also didn't have an incredible average of fantasy points, 20.52 per game. That was even less than a full point less than Aaron Rodgers, who I already compared and showed you that in the splits was worse than Kyler and Lamar. These guys just aren't in the same tier. I can understand Burrow being 7 or 6, but he's definitely not 5. He's definitely not 4 when that's his ceiling. There's no chance he exceeds any of the guys ahead of him. You want to draft a guy who has the ability to do that. Lamar Jackson has that quarterback 1 finish. Kyler Murray has put up multiple quarterback 1 paces. They have the upside. Those guys don't.
Well, I'm going to end it here because I know we got a couple minutes to go.
2-minute warning.
2-minute warning. All right. At the end of the day, you got to go with consistency. And this is about 2022. This isn't about what you did last year or what you did in 2022. This is in 2020. This is about what you can do now. And right now, I'm looking at the Raiders roster. They're loaded offensively. 2 great receivers, 1 great tight end. They have a dual threat running back. And I'm looking at the Bengals. 3 phenomenal receivers that can stretch the field and do everything you possibly can. And Joe Mixon, he could be the problem with Joe Burrow, but he can also be a saving grace for screen passes. And I know Joe Burrow's completion percentage could be a little bit higher. I know he turns the football over a little bit too much, but at the same time, I'm telling you right now, 2022 Joe Burrow is going to take a massive leap. He's playing the best of the best. He's playing Tom Brady. He's playing his division. He's going to show his division why he's the best quarterback in that division over Lamar Jackson. I think in fantasy wise, you need a top tier passer, and Joe Burrow is going to play big in big time games this year. And then Justin Herbert, we can both agree. The only reason why I have him down a peg behind Patrick Mahomes is because Patrick Mahomes is a dual threat. He runs more than Justin Herbert does. Justin Herbert's just a passer. At the end of the day, you want dual threat quarterbacks at the top. Josh Allen is an aggressive runner. he can get you fantasy points, but he can also air it out too. Patrick Mahomes can scramble and get points with his feet, but he can also throw the ball too in many different ways. Justin Herbert, pure passer. Love him. Joe Burrow, pure passer. Has all the tools. Derek Carr, coming into this year, unstoppable. And I think the Raiders are going to make some noise this year offensively. And in fantasy-wise, I take Devontae Adams. If you have Devontae Adams and Derek Carr on your fantasy team, you're set for the next decade in fantasy.
Herbert doesn't even run less than Mahomes. They both had over 300 yards and over 60 attempts. They're the same in that category.
30 seconds.
Burrow had 118 rushing yards last year. It's not about him being a bad quarterback. Overall, objectively, Joe Burrow and Derek Carr might both be better quarterbacks than Lamar Jackson next year. That's a fair debate to have. But you're not drafting a guy at number 4 who had 118 rushing yards last year in a 4-point passing touchdown fantasy football league. It just makes no sense. It's not good strategy. It's not going for the upside. It's getting a very replaceable player when you can find guys who can put up consistent passing stats on the waiver wire. Sure, maybe not quite to the extent that Joe Burrow does, but if you're not running the ball enough, you're not going to be good in fantasy. Herbert had nearly 3 times the yards that Burrow did, and he's right around Mahomes' area. The narrative that Mahomes is a dual threat, Herbert's not, that's not true. They're about the same in terms of those categories. It's just that Herbert was more electric overall, had more big plays, and kept all his weapons and gained more guys, while Mahomes lost them last year.
And that is time. I expect you two to bring the heat during our Crossfire segment, and you guys did not disappoint, so appreciate that. Calvin, all right, you're all here on mute. Matt, your 2-minute closing argument starts now, my friend.
All right, so I went over the AFC. I've said it before. The AFC is the class of fantasy football as far as quarterbacks are concerned. Kyler Murray is a safe bet in the beginning of the year, but not all term. If you want a guy who's going to perform well all season long, go with Josh Allen. Go with Patrick Mahomes. Those guys can prove it to you. Justin Herbert has been consistent throughout. He threw 5,000 yards in just his second year. We agreed on all those things. But let me just tell you what separates Derek Carr. The arm, the fact that he has Josh McDaniels as his head coach, who's an offensive guru. He's going to make Derek Carr a star. He's got all the tools to work with, and the Raiders offensively are stacked. And Kyler Murray is going to miss some time from DeAndre Hopkins. He's going to have to redevelop a rapport with Marquise Brown. And as much as I love Lamar Jackson, he's a former MVP. The league figured him out. He's not the explosive guy that we saw. He's not the explosive guy that we saw from 2019 that led the league in fantasy points. Meanwhile, Derek Carr, while he's ranked 13th in fantasy, he's a steal if you can get him in the 5th or 6th round, maybe even the 7th round if you're drafting that late. But me personally, mobile quarterbacks are great if you have the right one. Mahomes is the right one. Allen is the right one. Herbert, he's up there. He's not as mobile as people remember him to, but he's more prolific with his arm. But Lamar Jackson, Kyler Murray, I just think that they're safe picks for week-to-week situations, but not a full season.
All right, leaving time on the clock. Short and sweet, Matt. Appreciate it. All right, Matt, you can go on mute. Calvin, your 2-minute closing statement starts now.
Okay, so the problem I have is that this is not a debate about who is the best quarterback in the NFL, absolutely. And I know, both of us obviously know that. But the fact is, we're talking about with guys like Derek Carr and Joe Burrow, it's improvement with their arm. Derek Carr taking the leap with his arm. He had 108 rushing yards last year. Joe Burrow had 118. Those two combined were about 2/3 of even what Herbert and Mahomes had. And those are the bottom tier rushers on my list. Guys like Josh Allen and Kyler Murray were on another level in terms of rushing and receiving. Kyler Murray had 14 games started, 423 yards rushing and 5 touchdowns. Allen had even more, was in the 600s and had even more touchdowns because he runs it in at the goal line. And Lamar Jackson has had a 1,000-yard rushing season before. He's the best rushing quarterback in the league. To say Mahomes is a dual threat may be true slightly. It's not true to the extent of these other guys. That's why he's behind them. It's for fantasy football. It's not that Mahomes is a bad quarterback. It's not even that he's just a good quarterback. He's a great quarterback who is not a top 3 guy for fantasy. We agree, of course, on Allen at the top. Matt and I both agree on that. He had Mahomes at 2. I don't understand how you can have Mahomes ahead of Herbert when Herbert outperformed Mahomes last year and Mahomes just lost Tyreek Hill. Herbert didn't lose anybody. Then I told you Murray and Jackson at 3 and 4. They both have top level rushing upside. Upside to be the quarterback 1 overall, not just another replaceable guy. And then of course I Patrick Mahomes at 5 because he's an awesome player. But again, Joe Burrow and Derek Carr do not run the ball. And as I showed you statistically earlier, they were just not in the same tier as Kyler and Lamar, even when Kyler and Lamar were battling injuries and illness last year, especially Derek Carr, who averaged under 16 fantasy points a game. Even Aaron Rodgers with Devontae Adams couldn't catch up to Kyler Murray and Lamar Jackson. How are we expecting Derek Carr to exceed Aaron Rodgers and get the ball a ton to Devontae Adams and get that boost and be better than Aaron Rodgers was in 2021? It just makes no sense, and that's his absolute ceiling. And when you talk about guys like Murray and Jackson, who have a ceiling even higher than they did last year, it's just absolutely not a question who you take in drafts. At this point, those are my top 5 guys: Allen, Herbert, Murray, Jackson, Mahomes. I can see my time.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen, for that excellent opening debate. I just dropped the voting links in the chat right now, and feel free to go ahead and vote. And I want to remind everyone that the casters, Calvin and Matt, you're unable to vote. So I should only get 11 votes in because I have 11 people in my listening roster.
All right, that was a great debate. That was so fun, Matt. Thanks a lot.
Oh, no problem, man. That was tiring. Whew.
Yeah, man. Welcome to the Terror Dome, huh?
Oh man, no, listen. I'm scared shitless actually because debut. I wanted to make a strong first impression, and I hope I did that.
Yeah, that was so much fun. That was one of the most fun I've done, I would say. So yeah, that was a lot of fun for sure.
Oh wow.
And Matt, it looks like you did make a good first impression, my friend. The audience has given you 77.8% of the vote. There's 9 people in here, so that is that will be a majority. So congratulations on winning your debut, sir. And Calvin,
my God, are you serious?
Yes, sir.
Oh my God.
Yeah, that's
great job by both of you. This was fantastic.
Calvin, can I just say something to Calvin before I go?
Sure, go for it.
Calvin, I've watched you on this show a couple of times, and you've brought the heat to Zach, and you've brought the heat to a couple other people. But I gotta tell you, man, I was scared I was gonna lose this one. You really came up with the statistics. You came up with everything. You threw every counter to every punch I threw, and I tip the hat to you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. That was a really fun one for sure. And I mean, you brought the heat too. I think that might have been like the best debate I've ever faced. So that was awesome. You definitely deserved it. So congrats.
Thank you very much. All right, I got to get going, but thank you so much for having me.
Of course, Matt. Thank you. And Calvin, thank you as well. Gentlemen, I appreciate the sportsmanship. This is what we like to see here on Light 'em Up. Passionate debate, but, still respecting each other and just challenging the idea. So more of that energy throughout the rest of the night and for the future shows. I'd love to see that. So thank you both, gentlemen, again, and I'll drop you off and get us ready for our next debate.
Hey guys, James Fleming here, host of the Pigpen Thursdays at 9 Eastern Time, where we talk mostly lists. We compare a lot of top 10s. Also host the Gamble and Ramble Show Sundays before football every week. Stay tuned for more Light 'em Up.
Great way to get things started off tonight. And now we'll go ahead and get set up for our first of 2 Round 'em Up debates. And our first one will feature 2 Light 'em Up debutants in Mibs and Richie from PNR Sports, as well as Jake 3152. So let me get them up in here. All right, Mibs, I sent you an invite. Let's get Jake in here. Oh, okay, yep, there's Jake. Invite him as a speaker. And then last but not least, let's get Richie in here. Where you are, Richie? There you go. All right. Okay, Bibbs, Jake, and Richie. Everyone is in here. How are we doing this evening?
Ladies and gentlemen, I have arrived. It is time. The SmackDown is about to happen.
Oh, boy.
I'm just kidding. That's all I'm doing. Right?
By the way, Mibs, thank you so much for the follow. I just followed you right back.
Nah, no problem. Can everybody hear me all right? Make sure there's no feedback or something.
Yep. I'm trying to make sure my feedback is not being impacted as well.
It's good over here, yeah.
Okay, sweet. All right, so here we go, right? So our first round up topic of this evening, and we're going to discuss biggest villains in sports. So just a reminder to our listening audience, how Round 'em Up works is that we have 2 10-minute halves. And what happens is that for the first vote, you're gonna vote for who you thought performed the best and arguing for who is the best villain. And if they finish in the top 2, they will move on to the second half. And then after the second half, we'll do the same voting again between the final 2. And whoever comes out first will get 3 points. Whoever comes second will get 1 point. And of course, who was eliminated in the first part gets 0 points. So that's how Round 'em Up works. And that's how we're going to get things started off here. So again, we're going to be debating the biggest villain in sports of all time. And so, Jake, by you having the better all-time record, you can kind of lead us off here in the discussion. And I'll just prompt you with saying, I guess, give us who your villain is and why. And we'll go from there. So go ahead, my friend.
All right. The biggest villain in the history of sports is none other than former Texas Rangers shortstop, former Seattle Mariners shortstop, and former New York Yankees third baseman, Alex Rodriguez. He is the biggest villain in all of sports. Not even Yankee fans. Every Yankee fan I talk to, and I live in New York, So I know a lot of them. Most of my friends are Yankee fans. Unfortunately for me, as a Met fan, most of them hate A-Rod. They all hate A-Rod. None of them have a single good thing to say about this dude. They just don't. And like a lot of Yankees players don't like him. Derek Jeter just did an interview saying he was a bad teammate. And Jeter, played literally right next to him, shortstop and third base for 10, 12 years. So no one likes the dude. He gets booed everywhere he goes. Years ago, I was on vacation with my dad. We went in Miami. So we went to a Marlins game. The Marlins were playing, I think they're playing the Yankees. They're playing the Yankees. Marlins Yankees. A-Rod comes to the plate. He got booed. Why does Miami hate A-Rod? Because he's A-Rod, and everyone hates A-Rod. So of course he got booed. Like, he single-handedly broke up the ESPN broadcast. Him and Jessica Mendoza, Matt Vasgersian. I mean, some people didn't like Jessica Mendoza. I mean, that one's up for debate. But he single-handedly broke it up because, like, it didn't matter if he was good or not. Just no one wants to see his stupid face on their televisions. And also, if you look at his resume, it's like 4 full-time in home runs, World Series, 10, 12-time All-Star. Still, not a single person, as I know, wants to put him in the Hall of Fame. Meanwhile, you look just at the resume, he should easily be in the Hall of Fame. So that is why Alex Rodriguez is the biggest villain in the history of sports.
All right. Thank you, Jake. Mibs, let's go to you. Who's your biggest villain and why?
Now, the biggest villain. So I try to think of who exists across all sports, who can be hated by every fandom, and it's the official. It's the referee himself. There's no bigger group that transcends that receives hatred by athletes, coaches, spectators, on site, and viewing from home. The referee has a place in everybody who participates in sports' heart, and you'll be hard pressed to find anybody without a story concerning a controversial call or simply blown call that has permanently altered their view of sports. And I think the official is special because, yes, that's past, that's present, that's future, that's every sport under the sun. And if we want to get even more colorful with it, it's across every level and even transcends both fictional sports and real life sports as well. The official is the most hated villain in all of sports.
Okay. Thank you, Mibs. Richie, bring us home here. Give us your villain and why, and then we'll just open this bad boy up.
I am going to bring you home, David. All right. So, my pick, when you think about villains and stuff, that might not be the first thing that you think about. But I want you guys to open up your craniums and open up your ears and listen to me for a second, okay? Jake brings up decorated players. Mibs brings up hated figures all time, all around. And I get that. That makes sense. I completely respect that. Let's look at, the most decorated player of all time in football. And, probably one of, if not, probably debatably the greatest athlete of all time, Tom Brady, Okay, so maybe he's loved by Patriots fans. Maybe he's loved by Buccaneers fans. But let me tell you something. To all those people out there, I can give you 7 reasons why Tom Brady is the greatest villain of all time, or I can give you 22 reasons why he's the greatest villain of all time. Okay, let's look at all the years that he's done things where people are just pissed off by him. The fans dislike him. You know why? Because he wins. Okay? And everyone hates winning when it's not your team. And whenever that goes, there's a 70% chance that Tom Brady's going to win the Super Bowl whenever he goes in. And for 22 years, the percentages are pretty high that he's going to the Super Bowl. And there's a couple of years where he was injured. So the percentages are even higher than that. So I want you guys to think about that, let it soak in, and we're about to dive into this even more.
All right, yeah, we're just passing the halfway mark here for the first half of this roundup up. So let's get after it. I know you guys got something to say now, so let's get at it.
Listen, guys, listen. Okay, I'm gonna ask you, Jake. I'm gonna ask you a question.
I'm ready.
So, A-Rod, what? I want you to think of the best player in the MLB in the 2000s. Can you tell me who it is?
In the 2000s, well,
Yes.
Well, there was a couple. I mean, I'm sure A-Rod was in the conversation. I know Bonds did play for a few years. There was a bunch of guys in the conversation.
Okay. So it was debatable. He wasn't the best, but you could make the argument that he was.
That's accurate, I would say, yes.
Okay, so let's move to the 2010s really quick, if you don't mind.
Okay.
Who is the best MLB player in the 2010s?
Michael Trout.
Okay, yeah.
Mibs, you don't have to stay on the sideline and watch this play out, by the way. You can jump in here.
Yeah, no, that's okay. I'm gonna let PNR Richie, I'm out here dig himself a hole, because if he wants to go decade by decade, I promise you,
No.
there's a blown call.
You're next, Mibs. Okay.
There's a blown call in every decade. Okay.
Okay.
I'm not worried about it.
Now, I am starting specifically on accolades and just great players in general, specifically because when we're talking about villains, we can talk about winning all we want. Play whenever, you know the phrase, you can become the hero, you can die the hero, or you can live long enough to see yourself become the villain. That's an iconic line. I mean, everybody knows that.
Of course.
All these players that you mentioned, they're great. And I would say that A-Rod is great too. But I mean, I don't know. I wouldn't put A-Rod in that huge tier of MLB players of all time. I don't know. I mean, when you think of Tom Brady, he is at the top. It's undeniable. So I don't know. Explain yourself a little bit with the dish that I just gave you.
Well, Richie, you're just saying, I don't know how this pertains to the debate. You're just saying that Tom Brady is just better. Are you trying to say, Richie, wait, hold on, Richie. What is your reason that you think Tom Brady could be the legend? Is it because he wins luck? Because he had 7 Super Bowls, and at the age of 97,308, he still can take a team to 12 wins? Or is it because of other factors? What is your reason Tom Brady's hated?
2-minute warning. First half, 2-minute warning.
So, do you know about Deflategate?
Of course.
Yeah.
I'm not that young.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people didn't like it. And the fact that during that year, 2014, a lot of people were just talking bad about the Patriots organization. You know what happened the year afterwards? They won the championship. They won the Super Bowl.
Richie. That's. I hear what you're trying to say, right? It's about, hey, why the greatest athletes receive the greatest hates. You're great long enough, people start to hate you. It might as well be a heel flip as far as the progression of great athletes. But we can't forget a 2001 very snowy AFC divisional playoff game is where Brady starts to see a lot of his hates. Raiders fan might as well call it D-Day. All right, the effort here is where we see a fumble that's a fumble not be a fumble because we get introduced to the tuck rule. Right, the tuck rule is enacted, and 5 plays later they win that game. All right, this is 2001 Tom Brady. So before anybody could really
1 minute ago
keep him in the Hall of Fame. All right, the hatred started before that. How could this kid from nowhere, late in the draft, be so lucky when this Ravens team is playing their ass off? That's where the hate really begins, is because of a controversial call in a snowy AFC divisional playoff game.
So you think the refs is the reason why Tom Brady is hated?
I think it's the starting point. Remember, this is 2001 Tom Brady.
And that's whenever he wasn't anything. Most of the time, people could agree that most quarterbacks during that time, early on in their career, they weren't anything just yet. But I do think you make a good point with the refs. I will say, anytime that Tom Brady's in the playoffs, people are already concerned that the refs are going to be on his side because he's so loved by either Patriots fans or Buccaneers fans, and then also the refs. And I'm not saying the NFL's rigged. I'm not saying that. But I will say that because of ratings, the refs are going to think well, we got to keep Tom Brady in this game if he's, lagging behind a little bit.
I got to pause it there. Because we got to decide who's going to go into the second half here and who's going to drop off here. So let me drop the voting links in the chat here. I have to bite my tongue so much because of what you guys have said through here. So I'm going to remain impartial, but I have thoughts. Voting links are in the chat. Let me go to the next question in here. All right. So voting is now open.
Can you guys hear me okay? I know someone in the chat said they were having trouble.
Yeah, I can hear you just fine, Jake.
Okay.
All right, there are 11 you guys in here. Top 2, remember, get to go on to the second half. Oh, did the vote? This just reset? Oh, I think I went to someone tapped. Okay, sorry. 1 second. 1 second. 1 second. Crap. Okay, you guys are voting in the second portion. Okay. Let's see here. That's fine. I can reset this. Okay. So it looks like Mibs and Richie are going on to the second half here. Oh, actually, that worked out perfectly. We got 6 votes on the first half question, and then the second half question, I got 5 votes. That's 11 you guys in here. So that works out perfectly. So I'm going to pause voting there. And Mibs, Richie, our 2 Light 'em Up debutants tonight. We'll be moving on to the second half. Jake, unfortunately, we have to say goodbye to you, my friend. But thank you for a great first half, and I'm sure we'll see you on a future episode.
Yeah, thank you, Mibs. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Dave, and the entire Light 'em Up crew for having me on. And my not good debating hasn't lowered the ratings too much. Maybe I'll come back if you guys will have me.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Jake.
You were valiant, darling.
Good luck, guys.
All right. Light 'em up. Now we have Mibs, who again is arguing on behalf of the officials, referees, being the biggest villain in sports, and Richie, who is arguing on quote unquote behalf Tom Brady. So Mibs, Richie, light 'em up for second half.
Put them up.
Hey, Richie, I want to start off by going to a soccer example. All right.
Go ahead.
You probably know where I'm going to go here, but this is a national shame. It takes its place between England and Argentina, and it's known as the hand of God. Right? This is how big the villain is that the referees missed a handball of the legendary Maradona literally punching the ball into the net for an England win, and the score went on to end that game, that World Cup qualifier, 1-0.
Oh my God.
That's a national shame.
Yeah,
everybody
that's
on the field. You can Google it right now. You'll see pictures of his hand reaching above the keeper. And keep in mind, Maradona, as great as he is.
Do me a favor. Why don't you tell me another incident in another sport of just a heinous thing committed by the refs? Okay?
Oh my goodness.
How about basketball? How about that? How about you tell me something about that?
I mean, let's start in college basketball. Whether it's Chris Webber's travel in the 1993 national championship, but nobody else saw it.
Right.
Everybody saw it except for the refs.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Whether it's Sacramento losing to the Lakers.
Yeah, and who could forget about the Saints and how they've been screwed over countless times in the 2010s,
Nickel Robbie Coleman, right, is probably one of the most hated men in New Orleans because the refs blew the call.
Right, that's awful. That's awful. We could go on and on and on about just the refs. Oh my God, there's nothing we can do. Oh, the refs messed up all the games. Oh my God. Let's just break this down for a second. I can't really argue about basketball or baseball or anything like that because my player is an NFL player. But I will say Tom Brady has dominated the game from whenever he first came into the league. I mean, he has cemented his legacy like in 2007, and then he kept going. You're telling me that all of these refs calls, I mean, there's any single time that in sports shows and talk shows, whenever something goes wrong, sure, there is plenty to complain about whenever the refs mess up. But at the end of the day, that's going to happen. It's inevitable. And you know what isn't inevitable? Having a 100% record. Unless you're Michael Jordan, which, I mean, that's a different story. But with Tom Brady, it's way harder to win a Super Bowl for a quarterback or for somebody in the NFL. It is so hard. You lose one time in the playoffs and you're done. That is so unfortunate.
Richie. I think we're talking on two sides of the coin here, as we should be. It's a debate. I disagree with how you're qualifying what a villain is. Right. I'm thinking of who receives the most hate over the longest period of times by the most different groups of people. Right. That is the officials, right? That is how I'm understanding what a villain
in
is.
my opinion, I don't think it matters in terms of length, but what does matter is what they do during that period of time.
You know what?
Tom Brady, during his period of time, has developed so much hate from other teams that it's
I hear you. I really do, right? I think length of time matters because the question does consider biggest villain in sports all time, right? And so to answer that question, biggest villain in sports all time, I picked the only actor who is in sports for all of time.
The only actor in sports
who is there the entire time. So this is an all-time debate. And all-time, across all of football, there is no Tom Brady. But across all of football, there is an official that is changing history for the worst in many people's eyes. And that's hard to overlook. In very blatant ways, easy ways to hate. I'll never forget, I'm a Steeler fan, when Jerome Bettis called tails in overtime. Everybody heard him call tails, but apparently Phil Puckett didn't. And Phil Puckett heard heads. Detroit gets the balls. Steelers lose that game.
5-minute warning, gentlemen. 5 minutes remaining.
What's interesting is that you do say that the refs have had a longer period of time, but they're not the face of the NFL. Whenever you think about the NFL, you think of football and stuff. You don't say, "Geez, I wonder what the refs are gonna do," or like, "Geez, like I can't wait to see the refs screw up." I mean, that's not something that you look forward to, and you also don't look forward to Tom Brady messing things up. And honestly, we all were thinking the same thing. God, I hope he retires. Okay, and he came back. That was a sick joke, man.
Think about this.
I didn't even bring up that Belichick and him have been compared to Palpatine and Vader, which is like super iconic in Star Wars and villainy and stuff. When you think of that dynamic with him in New England, that it just spells villainy. And he kisses his kids on the lips. That's just awful. That's heinous.
Yo. So I'm again, to just keep to meet you where you are, right? You had the entirety of the NFL fandom in the year of the replacement refs really considering, man, should they really just have a raffle for guys in the stadium to come and officiate this game on the field? Because that's how impactful the referees are on the game. You had a year of replacement refs, and everybody was like, gosh, literally a butterfly on a stick would be better than these guys on the field because it changes everything. As much as we like to think that any NFL game is just two teams going at it, there's not. There's a third team, they're wearing a different jersey, and they have just as much impact as the players and the coaches.
It's not always the case, though. It doesn't happen all the time. It happens every other year. But Tom Brady's a force of nature. Every single year he's a threat. And the only times that he's lost in the Super Bowl, they were super close. Nobody thought Nick Foles was going to pull off the Super Bowl.
The referees are supposed to help keep the game flowing and relatively safe and relatively consistent, right?
But they don't. And also, when it comes to officiating games with Tom Brady in the playoffs, you can pretty much say that the refs are in Brady's pocket. I mean, they do. I mean, there is no reason why the refs would be against Tom Brady. And if they did on national TV, they would be crucified. People would be like, "Oh my God."
Can I throw something out here?
That alone.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
You got about 2.5 minutes left. Let me just throw something out here. Is there a redemption arc for your villain? Is there any way they could win over the hearts of the people that they pissed off over, yeah. Okay. Let's talk about that. 2.5 minutes to go.
Well, I'll let you go first, Mibs. What do you think?
That redemption arc is steep in terms of officiating. It's real steep. I don't think there's something redeemable about this, right? Just because of how much we see them in the pros, at the amateur level, across every sport. There is no redemption arc to be in the good graces of everybody because they have negatively affected everybody. And that's why they're the greatest, biggest villains ever. There is no redemption arc.
I'll give you a redemption arc for Tom Brady.
Where the referees get their yellow jacket and walk into a hall of honors in people's good graces. That will never come for the officials.
Yeah, I don't know about that, but I can tell you this: Tom Brady, if he retired, he would have a huge redemption arc because nobody wants to see him play again. He's been winning for so long, and we know that there's a super good chance that he'd be able to win. Let me give you a scenario, kind of like Lion King. You know how like Simba had to leave the country, for Africa and stuff, and then Scar took over the whole kingdom and stuff, and then Simba came back, and then he won over the land and stuff. I'm gonna get somewhere with this. Patrick Mahomes was seen as the golden child. He won the MVP. He was seen as the next coming of Jesus when he was in the NFL, and people thought that he was going to dethrone Brady. And then there was nothing that they could do in terms of rules for the overtime, and Tom Brady ended up winning, and they went to the Super Bowl and they won the chip. Hey, and then he won fair and square in 2021.
We can look back into the Cold War, and we saw the U.S. basketball team get pulled back onto the court after the clock hit 0.
15 seconds.
3 different times. All right. Colorado versus Missouri gets 5 downs in football. If 15 seconds, if 20 seconds goes by and David gives me 10 more seconds to talk and doesn't give you, Tom, he would also be the worst official in debate history.
None of these sports matter because none of these players have done as much as Tom Brady, which is win. And whenever you win, it's pure villainy, and everyone hates you.
I gotta stop it there. Great round them up, gentlemen.
Dude, I could have kept going. That was so good.
I didn't want to stop it. I'll be completely honest. I did not want to stop it. This was fantastic. The chat was all over the place. I love it. Thank you both so much for the entertainment. Okay, let me make sure I got the right question set up in here because there's only 2 of you all remaining. Okay, yep. Who won the second half? So let's do 1, 2. Okay, and let me double check here before I open it up.
Who would have been your second option?
Yeah. My second option would have been Jackie Robinson.
That's dark. Good, but dark. No pun intended.
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay. So here we go. Votes are pouring in. There are 16 of you guys in here. Wow. Okay. We got 11 votes. So let's keep them pouring in. Mibs is leading right now. I believe there are enough votes remaining to where I can keep this going for about another minute or so. Yeah. So it's 7-4 right now in terms of raw vote count. So if there's enough of you guys still in here, if you still want to vote.
Hey Richie, if you didn't pick Tom, who was second for you?
I actually probably would have gone with Mike Tyson.
Oh, imagine that. A Jackie Robinson, Mike Tyson debate.
That would have been insane. I would have had to do more research, but yeah.
All right. Well, this is holding steady at 11 votes. So I guess everyone that wanted to vote has voted. So Mibs, congratulations on getting your first victory on Line 'em Up. You will come out of this roundup with 3 points. Richie, you'll come out with 1 point. And Jake, like I said earlier, you'll come away with 0 points. But this was a very, very entertaining debate. And I appreciate you guys for coming on and entertaining us. This is fantastic.
Hey, it's always a pleasure, man. I really enjoyed it. It was great.
Yeah, I appreciate it, David. I appreciate it, Richie.
Hey guys, it's Lily Schumacher. When I'm not debating, you can find me hosting Pitches Be Crazy every Thursday night at 8:15 p.m. Eastern Time, and co-hosting Bat Flips and Chill with John Ball every Tuesday at 9 p.m. Eastern, live on Colorcast. Thank you so much for listening to Light 'em Up. Now, let's get back to the action.
Sports fan. We're going to have Zach Cantrell. We're going to have Wolmer. And we're going to have whodatnation pull up in here. So let's get them on and get ready for our final debate of the evening. Wolmer, I invite you as a speaker. Go get Mr. Zach Cantrell as a speaker. And then where's Whodat at? Here we go. All right.
Let's do this.
Let's go.
All right. I got Wolmer, I got Zach, and I got Whodat. All right.
I could listen to Tom Brady hate forever. Just saying.
that was fantastic. That was absolutely fantastic.
I ain't gonna lie. The one that called me was a no call rule. Mibs, me and you got to talk. We got to talk. We got to talk. That's gonna be later on.
All right, gentlemen. Well, here we go. Final debate of the evening. Best month to be a sports fan. I already know you guys are this got some heat in the Discord earlier about months being included or not included. So I'm expecting you guys to keep that same energy going. Wolmer, you have one more win than Zach. So by that, you will be able to lead off tonight's discussion. So tell us why you chose your month as the best month to be a sports fan, my friend.
All right, so I did choose October, and I chose October because there is something for every single fan. There's not just one sport. There's multiple sports. This is also the only month of the whole entire calendar year where all four major sports legit have games played that actually mean something. For the MLB, you have the end of the regular season, which is always competitive because you got teams bidding for wild card spots. You have the playoffs, and you have the World Series. The NHL, their regular season begins. The NBA, their regular season begins. The NFL, well, their season is continuing, and this is where those teams start to separate a little bit, and it shows what teams are legit good and what teams are going to be bidding for that first draft pick in the NFL draft. But don't forget, there's also college sports. So college football, there is a ton of really good games on television, and you also see separation of what teams are going to be in playoff contention and what teams are not, but still going to be ranked and possibly make it into their conference championship games and eventually bowl games. You also have college basketball, which starts including college hockey. There's a little bit of something for everybody. You can't tell me that there's not something out of everything I just said that it doesn't entice you a little bit. It's all competitive. It's all fun. You don't get anything like you get in October in any other month of the calendar year. All four major sports are off and going and are still extremely fun to watch. This is also the time of year where all those sports that are starting up, you're at least still enticed to watch. You don't know if your team is going to be good or bad. You still want to see what your team is going to do. It's the beginning of the season. You're hyped. You're ready to get going. This is the start of the whole entire grind to get to the playoffs and eventually win that trophy that you're going to lift above your head in the end. There really is no better month than October.
So January is the best sports month of the year. And you know why January is the best sports month of the year? Because it has arguably the best postseason in all of sports. No, it's not March Madness. No, it's not the NHL playoffs. It's the NFL playoffs. You just look at last year's NFL playoffs. The last 8 games were all decided by 7 points or less. We've never had more drama, a month full of drama more than we had all last year. And you want to talk college football? You got the Rose Bowl, you got the Sugar Bowl, you got the Orange Bowl, and you got the National Championship game. You talk about an S-tier day in the sports calendar, New Year's Day. You've got the NHL Winter Classic. You've got Premier League soccer. You've got big college football bowl games. And if you want to go to college basketball, it's a start of conference play. It's a return of classic rivalry matchups. That's when you start getting your Duke, North Carolinas. That's when you get the Big East games. That's when you get Ohio State, Michigan. And then as far as the NBA and the NHL season, that's when they're really starting to get into full swing. This is just after Christmas in the NBA, and in the NHL, we're starting to figure out who's pretty good. So yeah, October might be the end of baseball season, but when you're talking about January, we're talking about the end of the NFL season. And last I checked, the NFL is king of all the sports, and it's the end of college football. But you also have the beginnings of basketball, hockey, and all these other games. And as far as baseball is concerned, you have the winter meetings. Those are always intriguing as well. January is the most underrated sports month of the year, and to me, it's the best month of the sports year.
I guess it's my turn. And just like both of you guys said, you said November. November is the best month of the year. Reason why being is, yes, you brought up college football. But how do you get to the bowl games? You sum up all the rivalries that are taking place in November. The NFL playoffs are going to form. That's when that's when the teams who are on the brink of making the wild card takes one-on-one in November. NBA takes off in October, but all the main matchups take off in November going into December. That's when college basketball comes in. All the great matchups take place in November. Plus, it's football season. Then you got the great weather, football weather. You got Thanksgiving. You got great football matchups on Thanksgiving. It doesn't get no better than this. And also, you mentioned Michigan versus Ohio State that take place in what? November. Everything sums up in November. Everything gets started in November. It's the premier month of all sports. Baseball actually their training takes place in November. So therefore, how can you sleep on November? November sums up all of the holiday season. Sports mixed with holidays makes what? So many memories. I can relate to so many things of happening in the month of November. But honestly, just like you guys say, you guys have your months and I have mine. November, hands down, is the best month of the year. of the sports fan. NBA,
I could argue
college basketball.
November's the worst month for NFL football because there's no stakes there. The season's just about at midseason. And you talk about Thanksgiving,
5
Detroit and
minutes.
Dallas. We're stuck watching the Lions and the Cowboys every single
Okay.
Thanksgiving. And unless the Cowboys get a good opponent, there's no real big game to watch because we know the Lions suck and we know the Cowboys are perennially a disappointment. So
I
unless you
also
give me
got,
the
I got a
Buffalo Bills,
second
Okay.
on Zach's
Okay.
here. I got a
Okay.
second on that. When was the last time we had a legit competitive football game on Thanksgiving that we actually enjoyed watching? I don't remember the last
Okay.
time we saw a game that was so much fun to watch. There
Okay.
hasn't really been one.
Cowboys Raiders last year was a good game, but that
Thank
was
you.
the first in a while.
I was just about to say that there are a few great games that you have not mentioned. The just like Mibs brought up, you had the Lions and Steelers Thanksgiving. Jerome Bettis says
That
tails.
was in the 90s.
That was in the 90s.
That was on Thanksgiving. You also, just like you said, Raiders Cowboys. You had the Leon let fumble
In the 90s.
in the
90s. Yep,
Thanks,
90s.
you know, also you had a great matchup in the 90s, Lions and Packers. Hey, that was good. You had Barry Sanders, you had Brett Favre, you had Sterling Sharp.
Can we talk about modern day Thanksgiving football? Because
modern
the
day
90s are great, but I was in diapers.
Honestly, me too. 94.
Also, I want to go up about the fact that your best matchups of college football season. I actually went and looked at a lot of the college football matchups this year. A lot of the better matchups happen to be actually in October this year. According to 24/7 Sports, 42 of the top 100 games happen in October. It includes the Battle of Michigan, Michigan State and Michigan. You also get Penn State versus Michigan. You got A&M versus Alabama this year, and that's the big talk between Jimbo Fisher and Nick Saban after the big storyline throughout the summer. Wouldn't that entice you more than just November stuff?
That's probably the only best matchup that you will get. Everybody knows the Michigan's always every year is one sided. One year you get Michigan, one year you get Michigan State, and I'm a diehard Michigan fan. So I can tell you last year.
Well, then we got bigger problems because go Bucks.
No, we can have that debate to the next one because we can go there.
We're gonna have that debate.
We definitely, Dave, if you're listening,
keep it focused on this topic, gentlemen.
Yeah.
but also, see, Rich, see, Pat, you're getting yourself in trouble. But also onto the fact of November sums everything up. Yes, in October you do have you got Alabama, Tennessee. You got Alabama, Texas A&M. Of course, that's gonna be a barn burner. I would love to watch that. Gonna watch it. You got Michigan State, but nobody's not paying attention today. Only the state of Michigan is paying attention.
I hate
I'm paying attention.
But it's still one of the most watched college football games each year.
Here's my issue with November. My problem with November is it's too early to care about the NBA or the NHL. College basketball, yeah, you might have a good Maui Invitational field, but if you don't have that, then the non-conference play sucks. And then baseball might sneak into that, but it's not a
2-minute warning.
And like I said, it's the worst month of the NFL season.
It's not actually the worst month of the NFL season. The worst month of the NFL season is actually December because you might get one game, week 17, week 18, to really determine who's gonna make it to the playoffs in the last slot. You don't want that. The month of November actually sums everything up.
Those games have stakes, though. The November games don't have stakes.
Exactly. But there's not a lot of games at stake. In the month of December, you probably have two games that's at stake. You probably have two teams probably on each conferences that's actually trying to make the last spot. And they probably face off in week 18. And those are what? Divisional games. Hands down, great game.
I hate to break it to you, but December is also the time we get some Saturday football games, so it's spread out a little more, so you at least can sit and watch football. You're a big football fan.
I mean, but those
nine
games
times out of 10,
NFL.
9 times out of 10, the NFL actually tries to put teams that were in the playoffs the previous year up against other playoff teams to make it like more enticing to watch.
1 minute remaining.
Those games tend to be extremely entertaining, none to say the less. Also, it's during those weeks in December where things actually matter for all these teams because you'll see teams push the hardest to the playoffs. These are going to be the teams that are going to pull out all the stops just to get there to get one of those wild card spots.
November is a setup month, while January and October are closer months. We determine championships in January and October. There are no titles decided in November.
Actually, October is where a lot of things take toll, where your body takes a whole lot of toll, where November, you should be fighting hard to take control of your division. That's when you put a chokehold on your division.
15
That's
seconds.
December.
Few teams last season. You had Buffalo. Buffalo took a chokehold after they lost that first game. October, they were 5-2. November, they ramshack everybody in November. You had the Giants. The Giants actually
Buffalo
showed
won the
up.
division in
All right,
December,
I got to
beating
stop
Buffalo.
it.
Yeah.
I got to stop it there. That's 10 minutes. First half is over. I expected heat, and I got it. So thank you both. Thank y'all. Well, thank all
Yes,
three of y'all
sir.
for that.
No
Here we
problem.
go. Voting
Solid.
link is in the chat.
Zach, I ain't gonna lie, you gave man, I am sweating over here.
Why is everybody
You
sweating
is
tonight? Y'all are
because
y'all are really
it's
putting
like
your all
I'm
into
sweating
this.
'cause I'm
David, there's a
outside in
heat
90
index
degree heat.
across the nation. That's why.
Clearly.
honestly, I ain't gonna lie, man. This is the best debate. David, you gotta get the Ohio State and Michigan debate. Me
Oh, I
and
don't think
Zach,
that's a debate though, but we'll have one.
hey, actually it kinda is. Okay. It kinda is because hey, we all had a century of what we had. It's split between the 90s, us in the 90s, 80s.
Man, you love the 90s. I don't remember shit. I'm 29.
I
Listen,
couldn't.
I'm honestly I go back and do a lot of history, so I really ain't had much to do, so I had to go back and do it. Not recently, but always, every day since I was little. So I mean, 80s, you guys got the 80s, we got the 70s, 2000s. Yeah, I give it to you guys somewhat, whatever. I ain't gonna get into that conversation.
Well, who that? Unfortunately, we'll have to take your remarks there as your parting thoughts as Zach and Wolmer finishing the top two here. But thank you for being such
no
a
problem, man.
entertaining participant in the first half here, and I'm sure we'll see you on a future debate, my man.
Oh, no problem, man. You guys take care. Love you guys, man. Zach Wolmer.
Good job, man.
Good job, dude.
All right. Light them up. Belongs to you two. Light them up.
Also, I want to thank Isaiah for at least reminding me about soccer. I had them on my list. MLS playoffs do start in October, and it's also a huge soccer month for the English Premier League, who has two of its more premier rivalries to take place during that month, but that's besides the point. Zach, you brought up in college football the Rose Bowl and what was the Sugar Bowl?
Sugar
Was the
Bowl,
other one?
Orange Bowl, title game, all of that.
All right. Well, two things. One, next year, the only bowl game that is going to matter is going to be the national title game that's in January. The other bowl games are in December. Sorry. But that really doesn't matter to the point. I know it's been a huge debate is if they got to change the college football playoffs, because you look at the two semifinal games, they're not that interesting. You obviously have most of the time, your top two teams running away with it. They're not entertaining. They're not any fun. Sure, the NFL playoffs take shape, but let's not forget that nothing is won in January. All you do is win your games to move on to make sure you get to February, where the Super Bowl is.
Well, a lot
you
of
don't
times
get that
the World
in January.
Series ends. The World Series ends in November half the time too.
Most of the time, it actually is in October, but with the new playoffs, it might end in November.
Yeah, with the extended playoffs.
Yeah, with the extended playoffs. The World Series at least starts in October. That's your championship. It could be 1 in 4 games, which means it ends October, which most likely it will not. But everything takes shape in October. You also get everything on your plate in October. You get every single sport. You don't get to see the same in January. Sure, the NHL and NBA might be more competitive, but by then, half the teams might be ruled out of playoffs. So a lot of fans lose interest in even watching their teams. You don't say that in October. All fans are excited to see what their teams are going to do, what their teams are going to look like in actual competition.
But that's why January is still good, because by then the season shouldn't be over for the NBA unless you're the Sacramento Kings, or in the NHL unless you're a scrub team. So you should be able to keep paying attention to your teams around that time. That's when the season really starts to get going. And as far as the NBA, like I said, Christmas Day is really the unofficial start of the NBA season. It's not the end of October. People don't care about the games the first 2 months of the year. They care about the Christmas games. And then in January, you start paying attention to see who's the contenders, who's the teams that have to trade their star players at the deadline. Don't forget about free agency and trades. You know, the NBA, everybody loves to go crazy with the trade deadline. But the biggest reason January is the best month of the year, because it's the most watched sports month of the year. The Super Bowl is the most watched event, but the most watched sports month of the year is January. Why? Because you got the NFL playoff games. Every single playoff game last year drew at least 25 million people. And then you have the college football national championship game, Alabama, Georgia, all SEC game. Most of us didn't care about it, but it still got 22 million people. So imagine if this year it's Alabama versus Ohio State. That's going to get 30 million people. So you have the college football national championship game, and you got the NFL playoffs. The number one sport in this country is football. It's not baseball, and football is being played at the highest level in January.
I hate to break it to you, but just because a matchup might seem good in the national title game does not mean more fans tune in each year. It's been pretty steady. I can almost say that national title games might seem fine, but you look at the games of recent, the close ones keep the more steady pace, But once games are blowouts like it was a couple years ago for Alabama, running all over, the ratings completely dropped. Nobody seemed to care that Alabama was still going to win. It was going to win that game, and they wanted to see them raise the trophy. It's everybody just wanted to tune to see what Alabama's going to do half the time. And then
Well, what about
everybody
the World
they know,
Series ratings? If you don't have the Yankees or the Dodgers, the last couple of years, the World Series ratings have kind of sucked. You look at last year, the World Series ratings, they went 6 games between the Braves and the Astros. The ratings weren't very good. In fact, they were record lows, and this has been a continuing trend with baseball over the last decade or so.
okay, so fine, you take baseball out, but you still get a lot of people tuning in to arguably college football, those big games that I was talking about, even more big games I'll bring into you. USC versus Utah. I got Texas and Oklahoma and Dallas. NC State versus Clemson. That was a big game last year because NC State upset Clemson in double overtime. You get Ohio State versus Michigan, Alabama and Arkansas, Wisconsin versus Michigan State, Tennessee
Ohio
and
State, Michigan's in November.
no, it's not. Wait, which game do you talk about?
Ohio State versus Michigan.
That is October 8th.
No, that's Michigan State.
I meant Ohio State and Michigan State. If I said
Okay,
Michigan,
you're
my
fine.
mistake. I had Michigan State on my paper.
That's
But
fine.
still, Tennessee and LSU, Michigan, Iowa, LSU and Auburn, Virginia Tech and Pitt. That's a rivalry game. So there's a lot of really good games that you get right there that people are going to tune into. You get football from 12 p.m. to basically 2 a.m. You don't get that in January. It's a normal Saturday for a college football fan is tuning in from 10 a.m. for college game day to 2 a.m. when the final game wraps up. You don't get that. Sure, you
In
might
January,
think that
what you get for
5
the
minutes
NFL,
remaining, gentlemen.
what you get in the NFL playoffs for January now with 7 teams making the playoffs, you have 3 straight days of playoff games. You got a Saturday triple header, Sunday triple header, and you got a Monday Night Football game now. So you've got 7 games in 3 days. That's a cornucopia. And I haven't even mentioned in January is the end of the regular season. Remember last year, you had the Steelers winning an overtime game against the Ravens to sneak into the playoffs. You had the 49ers Rams, which is an amazing game. Chargers Raiders is one of the top 10 NFL games I've ever seen. And that was an unbelievable Week 18 game. So you've got the NFL regular season wrapping up before you even get to the playoffs. And yes, the ratings aren't necessarily great because Alabama and everybody's tired of them winning. But the fact of the matter is that's the ending of the college football season. And I agree with you that December 31st playoff games are stupid, but the Rose Bowl still means something to a lot of people. The Sugar Bowl still means something to a lot of people. Just ask Baylor fans when they won the Sugar Bowl last year. It was the biggest win in program history. Those games happen in January.
right.
Regular season college football is great, but you get things decided in January.
And also, here's a really big difference. You're bringing up NFL playoffs. Those are just weekends. What about during the weekdays? October, you get MLB playoffs during the weekdays, and then college football on Saturdays, NFL football on Sundays. You actually have big games almost every single day of the week.
You
don't
get college
get that
basketball conference play to get started. That's when you start getting the rivalry games, and that's when you start getting ready for March Madness. You have the NHL. That's when you should start paying attention to the Bruins or the Canadians or whoever your team is, the NHL regular season. So you still got the major sports going on during the week.
You're not guaranteed one every day, though. You're guaranteed something every day during October. Unless it's the World Series, there is no day off for baseball in that month. There's no
Don't
day
forget,
off.
you get the Royal Rumble as well, the WWE. Yeah, I'm gonna go there.
I don't blame you. I have that written down too. The Royal Rumble is still a fun event, but
The
still, that's
WWE is still a big
that's
thing, even
still
though
on a
Vince
Saturday.
McMahon's
That's a
gone.
weekend. You're still counting out weekdays. Which sure, you might get conference games during January, and things might shape up, but you're not guaranteed one every single day. You're not. You're frankly not. One of those days could all of a sudden turn into ranked team versus non-ranked team, and you got a 30, 40-point blowout. You don't.
Also known as the college football regular season.
That's not true. Actually, that's not very true.
Some of
We
those
saw some
SEC
instant
games.
classics last year. We did see some instant classics last year.
You do, but half the time you get Alabama Vanderbilt too. Nobody needs to see those games.
And it's not like they always televise them either. Each network picks out a big game to put on. Fox gets their big 4:00 game every single week, which actually sometimes is really, really good.
30 seconds remaining.
It's really good. You can't tell me otherwise.
That's true, but I can
you're
tell you
talking
what's
about
always
40
good. The NFL playoffs are always good. Every
That's not
single
true.
year.
All right, you brought up Wild Card Weekend. We saw maybe 2-3 good games at best. You got Tampa Bay and Philadelphia. That was not very fun to watch.
The last 8 games were decided by a touchdown or less. I'll take a bad wild card weekend if it means I get Bills Chiefs, I get Bengals Chiefs in the AFC Championship, and I get a pretty good Super Bowl. I'll take bad wild card weekend.
And that is time. That is time. I'll have to stop it there. Thank you both for just wrapping up what's been a fantastic show. Let me go ahead and drop this in here in the chat. Eager to see how this vote goes.
Wow, that was something.
That was something.
All right. 14 you guys in here, and I do want to remind everyone that the casters, Wolmer and Zach, please do not vote. And also, please do not send this link out to anybody else that's not here on the show.
Like Patrick said in the chat, it's a hot box reunion.
That's fantastic. Hot box reunion.
I was gonna say, if you get me and Wolmer on the same sports trivia team, nobody's beating us.
Nope. Nope.
All right, we are neck and neck here. Tied at 6, 13 votes. All right, I'm going to stop it there. That is 15 votes. Wolmer, you're going to come away with 3 points after this debate, my friend. You win 9-6. Thank you for a valiant effort. No more ties for you.
No more ties.
No more ties for Wolmer. Zach, thank you for a valiant effort. And of course, Whodat, appreciate you coming on to get this thing kicked off. Fantastic debate, gentlemen. Appreciate it so much.
It was.
That was very good.
I was hoping for a third straight tie. That would have been funny.
I would have been pissed.
Yeah, I don't even think I have a policy in place to handle ties, and I think I do for roundabout. I think I would have had Whodat come on and select who he wanted, who he think
Right.
debated. Yeah, actually, that is a tiebreaker. Yeah, Whodat would have selected who won the debate. So, but we don't have to go to that as Wolmer wins here in our final debate. So, again, thank you both for a fantastic third and final debate, and I'm sure I'll see you both around on a future episode.
That's right. We'll be there. Thanks, man.
All right.